Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Ag Forecast for South America, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I'm waiting this week on the newest update from NASA's Grace-Based Root Zone Soil Moisture Map. Our last one came out on March the 7th, and I expect to see another one of these coming out in the next couple of days here. What we still saw in parts of southern Brazil, primarily eastern Mato Grosso do Sul, and western Sao Paulo and Minas Gerais, getting down here into parts of Paraná, still struggling with very low soil moisture values. Same thing for parts of Paraguay. But this is an area that as of late has seen more thunderstorm activity since March the 7th. We've already seen a major improvement in the soil moisture values down in Argentina as well, due to some thunderstorm activity that we've had over the last 3 weeks. Now, this is an area that was deep in drought down here throughout the month of December, in January, and early February. So the heavy rains have come on as of late. In fact, looking back over the last 30 days, that's where you can see the heaviest rainfall occurring. It was coming out of here, Buenos Aires, over the Paraná River Basin, Uruguay, northern Argentina. There's been several areas in here that have seen a lot of precipitation. Lately, the rainfall's come back in through here. This is Paraná down to Rio Grande do Sul. There's been better rains in this part of Paraguay. But if you notice, there's a region right in through here. Again, that's Mato Grosso do Sul, over towards Sao Paulo, parts of Minas Gerais and southern Goiás that has still been struggling for some precipitation. We can see that by looking down on some satellite imagery as well. We've seen some improvement in the NDVI imagery here, right on the Paraná River Basin. But up into Mato Grosso do Sul, into this part of Paraná, that's another area that's still showing some stress to the crop. But it's been improving from Buenos Aires over toward Cordoba and up towards Santa Fe. In fact, let's go now and look at one of our favorite websites for this video, the World Ag weather site. So I think what I'll do is I'll start north to south. We're going to go to Brazil and go straight to Mato Grosso. Brazil's biggest producing area. In fact, let's flip this over to the soybean view. There we go. Still, things look very, very good. There's a slight deficit, but it's the trend that I want you to see. The slope of that line matches climatology. So we're not seeing drought conditions throughout Mato Grosso looking back over the last 60 days. Now, south of there into Mato Grosso do Sul, that's the area. See several time periods of drier conditions, and some of the heavy rains that have come in as of late have helped improve on that, but still that's why you're seeing those NDVI, low NDVI values and the drought stresses in those areas. From there, let's go down a little farther south into Paraná. Heavy rains as of late here in mid-March have helped bring up our precipitation totals, and even down into Rio Grande do Sul, we've seen the same thing. We're kind of working away slowly on the drought situation there. From there, why don't we just flip on down to Argentina, and in Cordoba, they've really made up for some major early season deficits, and we're right now back on average. Santa Fe is actually above average. That's right on the Paraná River, and this area in the northeast, in fact, let's go look here, much above average rains as of late. So we've gone from drought to flood. I mean, just flip-flopped in this part of Argentina. So we need to see how the crops are going to respond to these very heavy rains as of late. Now, as we look forward, one of the biggest troubles I've had in the forecast is figuring out what this La Nina was going to do. If you go back to December, January, and early February, there was a lot of evidence that I thought we'd see more of an east-faced or east-focused La Nina. That means the coldest water here. But throughout the month of March, the biggest surge of trade winds has been into this area. And why this is so important is as we get ready to forecast the longer range weather, the surge in trade winds is controlling the position of the MJO. And that's ultimately what we're watching here. And the MJO is trying to sit somewhere between here in the Indian Ocean and just north of Australia. There seems to be little evidence of it breaking out here into phases 6, 7, and 8. And I want to talk a lot about that, because we know that if it goes into phase 5, that's the driest phase as we get into the month of March and April for this part of Brazil. And if that happened, if it stayed in phase 5, the risk would be for, drier conditions on the safrinha crop. But as of late, I've been doing a little research into this, and I want to share with you why I think the forecast is more optimistic than negative for South America. And the reason why is I think we're going to have a hard time getting it out of phases 2, 3, and 4, which, as you can see, can put some drier pressure on that part, but nowhere near as it could be if it got out into phases 5 or phase 6. And here's why. The MJO in February came out into phase 3. We forecasted to come sweeping through phases 4 and 5, and it didn't. It did this. It collapsed back into null space. Some research showed, we went out and kind of did some research on this, found that this time of year, more than 40% of the MJO events don't get out of the Indian Ocean through Australia, which is phase 4 and 5, over into 6, 7, and 8. So if it came back here in early March and has popped back out here as of March 13th, the forecast is trying to sweep it back around through phases 3, 4, and 5. And again, if it gets here and stays here, this is where we have our biggest drought risk for the safrinha crop. What will likely happen, though, is a repeat of what you just saw, possibly collapsing back into null space and emerging again. Now, what's important about this is seeing the timing, and it's also important about just seeing that the MJO is likely going to spend most of the rest of the season probably here. If this La Nina continues to push these big surges of trade winds, we won't see it get out of the Indian Ocean and the maritime continent. Now, let's put in kind of a caveat. If it does, let's say it sweeps through and pops out into phase 6, 7, and 8, everything I'm about to share with you is going to change in a big way, okay? We're going to see drought resurging in Argentina, heavy rains in the north, and at this point, that's not the case. So over the next 10 days, near normal precipitation Mato Grosso. We're drier in Mato Grosso do Sul over to Brazil's eastern growing areas. There's still going to be precipitation in that area. We have chances of rain coming through Argentina and more rain in southern Brazil. So there's nothing about this map that shows major stress across broad areas. Even though you're like, well, I see a lot of dry conditions in through here. There's still rain coming into this area. All right, let me show it to you. This is our high-res European model forecast. See, as I play through Tuesday into Wednesday, the monsoon is still going in this area. We're still seeing precip. And there's several more days of drier weather in Argentina, but it's not hot. In fact, as they move toward fall, the temperatures are cooling off. They got a front coming through on Friday. See it down here? Storms in southern Brazil on Friday. And that front then stretches out into southern Brazil and Paraguay through Saturday morning, bringing storms into that area as well. So that means this weekend, if I rock back and forth on it, we've got more rain coming out of Argentina, getting into southern Brazil. Now, if we're drier anywhere, it's pretty far to the east. More normal Brazilian monsoonal rainfall in this area. That's through next Saturday, getting into Sunday. But you see yet another front shows up next week in Argentina, southern Brazil. It's going to eventually come into southern Brazil, bringing up the precip in that area. And again, no temperature stresses overall that I see that need to be talked about. So we can put all this together and just watch a 1 week sliding window. Yeah, over the next 7 days, we're mostly drier until that front gets here late this week. Normal rains over Mato Grosso. If it's drier, it's over here in Minas Gerais, okay? Sliding this 1 week window forward, you see the effect of the MJO trying to get over into phases 3, 4, and 5. Do you see how it's trying to paint this over drier? Not much drier, but a little bit drier than average, with wetter conditions to the south. Again, even if it did this, this would not be a major negative on the crop. But what I'm going to suggest here is that by the time we get to the end of March, instead of staying in phase 5 and making this area go even drier, the likelihood of the MJO collapsing, the return of normal monsoonal precipitation, at this point, based on evidence I've got, would likely return. So that means frequent frontal passages out of the south, above average precipitation here in Argentina, Paraguay, southern Brazil, Uruguay, going into the end of March. And the new long-range forecast suggests from the end of March through the end of April that seems to be the case. Notice that we've kind of seen the models trend a bit wetter here than what was originally forecast. And I think that is because the models are keying on the MJO's inability to get through and stay in phase 5 and 6 and instead collapse. Now, you got drier overall coming into Argentina, but remember, this is now moving into the beginning of fall. And so, we're seeing maybe this is more normal fall dryness with fewer fronts coming through here. But overall, I still don't see this as a bad signal given how much rain just came through this area. So the net effect of what I'm sharing with you here is that damage to the Brazilian crop was done early. And what we've seen since then seems to be not detrimental overall. Better rains in Mato Grosso are going to help that safrinha crop, which is done. It's planted. Almost all of it's planted. The harvest of soybeans is done. And we just don't see a lot of signals that would suggest that this is going to go over dry and have problems. Well, the monsoon shut down a bit early. There's not a lot of evidence of it doing that just yet, but we need to watch out for MJO phase 5 to get stuck to see if that actually occurs. And that's what I'll be watching, kind of studying this week, and I'll report back to you on Thursday. Okay. Thanks for your attention. I'll talk to you then.